Hi, Heroes of Drakenia. This is Haruki, your community manager, and today we have an amazing guest with us, Jeff Broadbent. You already met him in another Dev Diaries episode, and so, well, you have listened to his work while you were exploring the lands of Lotak. Jeff is the musical mastermind behind Rise of Balor soundtrack, but his work, of course, doesn't stop there. As a video game composer, Jeff has worked on titles such as Tom Clancy's End War Online, Assassin's Creed Identity, PlanetSide 2, Downgate, and a handful more. He has also worked on TV, where he has created television promos for shows such as CSI, Criminal Minds, The Big Bang Theory, Modern Family, a bunch more as well. He has also composed trailer music, and he finds time amidst all of that to be a sound designer. Hey there, Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. It's a great opportunity to talk with you all about composing and about the game score we created.
Yeah, I am super glad that I can talk to you again, and actually that I can talk to you, like, let's say live now, because the last time it was a little bit of sending you the questions and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
but welcome. So, well, a lot has happened since the last time we spoke with you. Actually, Race of Valor won the gold medal in the Best of Show category at the Global Music Awards, and actually later on, you also got a bronze position in the Telly Awards. So I'm gonna take this chance to send you, huge congratulations, and yeah, nicely done, no?
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, it was a great opportunity, and always a big surprise, and happy to have won those for the game. It was great.
It's very nice to see also, Drakensang and those in that category. So yeah, cool. Also, guys, remember that Rise of Valor soundtrack is hitting online stores on July the 26th. So you can find the album on iTunes, Amazon, and something. We'll put the links in the description down below, so you can also find them easily. So don't worry. And of course, don't forget to check our Facebook page, since we are making also some, giveaways. So if you're lucky, maybe you can snatch a free code for you. Okay, Jeff, but now I'm going to get to you, and let's get started. We normally start our interviews, explaining terms to our players to avoid confusion. So we have composer versus sound designer, and they are related to the world of sound and music, but they are quite different. Since you do both, can you explain us what's the difference between these two?
Yeah, sure. So a sound designer usually actually works in-house as an employee for the game developer. Not always, but often. In the case of Drakensang, working with Andy. Andy was the lead sound designer and the audio director. So the sound designer usually will primarily be creating the sound effects for the game, and often also handling the mixing of the game. Balancing the music and the sound effects. So sound designers primarily deal with sound effects. Composers deal with the music. So in the case of myself, I'd be composing the music and also working with the sound designer to get feedback. One of the things that myself I like a lot with music and sound design, because I've done both, is I try to take my experience in sound design with some knowledge of sound effects and things like that, and kind of apply it to the music. So, for example, in the score we did for Rise of Balor, I'd think in terms of the levels, like the ice level or the fire level, and try to make or use some instruments that sounded like some of the sound effects in the game levels. That kind of gives a bridge between the two.
So you work together with Andy in that respect, like Andy sends you something and then you say, okay, so I'm gonna kind of incorporate in my composition?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Andy
Okay.
would send me gameplay videos that I could, hear the sound design and see the visuals, and that kind of inspired me in creating the music.
Okay, and which one do you prefer, composer or sound designer?
I like both a lot, but I'd have to say I'm probably more of a composer at heart. I mean, music is most of what I do nowadays is composing, and music's always been my love growing up. So I'd say probably music is what I like the best.
Okay, so now that let's talk about the deep stuff here. So music. So how do you normally approach a composition? Like, how does the first spark of creation normally start, like in your head?
Yeah, so usually when I start working on a game score, I like to immerse myself in the game as much as possible to get ideas. That usually comes through, watching some gameplay videos, looking at a lot of concept art, and then I usually just start brainstorming. I'll usually just get out a sheet of paper, write down my ideas for some instruments we might use. I have I always have a sketch pad here in the studio, and I'll,
Hmm.
write out some melodies and stuff. And so I do all that brainstorming work before I actually compose anything, and that
Okay.
allows me to kind of get the bird's eye view and so on.
Okay, and when composing, what are the emotions that you go through? I mean, so the big value of music is the emotions that it can convey without the need of adding any words or anything. So in that sense, it's kind of universal. It must be amazing to convert a particular emotion into a tune. So how do you go through that? For example, with Rise of Valor, it's about this topic of exploration, of discovery. So yeah, did you experience that when you were composing Rise of Valor?
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. I
Okay.
mean,
Uh-huh.
yeah, like for the one of the first tracks I composed for Rise of Balor, it basically it was like when you first land in the territory on the shores and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and Andy was telling me how we wanted a sense of mystery, a bit of a disturbing vibe, upcoming danger, that kind of thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So basically, as a composer, you'll think of those emotions and you'll be like, okay, so now what instruments should I use to convey that? What harmonies? And all kinds of musical tricks go into that. But yeah, I mean, the job as the composer really is to think of the desired emotion that the player should feel as they're playing the game,
Mm-hmm.
and then just find the best way to, demonstrate that through the music and the instrument choice, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Now that you mentioned that first one, I remember when Andy sent us said, okay, so there is this, a Race of Valor soundtrack from Jeff, and then the first, score that I listened was that one. I was thinking, okay, this fits perfectly. So yeah. And how much of you, let's say, goes into a musical piece? Is there any specific game you have worked on that, you felt especially attached to it from a personal or, emotional point of view?
Yeah, I like all the projects I work on, and I always put some of my personal elements into all of them. One of them that stands out is a game called I Am Alive that I did
Mm-hmm.
maybe it was like 3 or 4 years ago. It was a Ubisoft game,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons I liked that a lot was it was really kind of unconventional. I mean, the game is like a modern apocalyptic survival game, but it gave me a chance to do a lot of sound design elements. I mean, we didn't use any orchestra instruments in the game, so I really had to think of how to use sound design elements and modern elements to make the music.
Mm-hmm.
And another cool part of it is the game, kind of like a film narrative. It had a some character development with the main character losing his family and stuff like that. So I could compose some melodies and stuff that matched that. It was a little bit more like film music in a way because there was some character development going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And also from your portfolio, we see, some games that were developed and or published by the Chinese company Tencent, such as Monster Hunter Online and Moonlight Blade. So, well, we are also, developing Drakensang for the Chinese market, and the way those games are played, of course, changes depending on different countries and cultures. So, I would like to know if this is, if this applies the same to music, if there are differences between, composing for different gaming communities, or not really. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely some differences. I mean, one of the things I've composed a lot of music for various Chinese games, and often what they'll want for that is they really like the Western music styles,
Mm-hmm.
but they also will ask me to add in some Chinese instruments sometimes, some, like ethnic bowed or plucked instruments,
Okay.
and also a little bit of use sometimes of Chinese scales or harmonies, so it has a little bit of a Chinese vibe to it. But really, there's not that big of a difference. I mean, they really like the Western, standard style of music, using the orchestra and so on. I'd say the main difference is they just like a hint, just a little
Uh-huh.
bit of Chinese instruments added sometimes. That's usually the request they give me.
Okay, okay, no, because I don't know, like me, I've played some, well, maybe not Chinese, but Japanese games, and it always strikes me that, some of their music compositions is a little bit, like over the top in terms of
Oh
dramatism
yeah,
and
right.
epicness, and all this drama, like raining, all over you.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a good point actually.
yeah,
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, the Japanese games are interesting because they kind of approach music a little more in the old school way,
Hmm.
because they came out with the Nintendo and kind of were the founders of a lot of video game consoles and so on. But they'll rely a little more on melody and tune, because
Yeah.
if we remember all the classic games like Mario and Zelda, there's so many melodies going on,
Hmm.
and they still like that melody emphasis often, and whereas a lot of the Western developers now,
Yeah.
Activision, Ubisoft, they kind of like music to take a more background role
Hmm.
nowadays. Don't have too much melody, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I just remember Metal Gear Solid and all those, dramatic scenes. But now that you mentioned like Mario, Zelda, so in the last interview actually you said that you also played video games back in the years, and that this was one of the reasons to start composing music. So, well, one of the questions that we got from the community is if you could share, which video games sparked your interest, some of the games and experience that led you, to pursue a career in music composition.
Yeah, there was a lot of a bunch of games that inspired me to that. One of the big ones was the Final Fantasy series.
Okay.
That was a big one because, and I'm talking about when it was on the Super Nintendo, like Final Fantasy 3 and things like that.
Okay.
The thing about that is that the composer for that, he's a very skilled composer. He knows how to use themes and motifs and assign them to the various characters in the game, and they'll develop. I mean, that was it was a big step up in quality from a lot of other video game soundtracks at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that, compositionally, I think that was a big one. Um, when the Sega Saturn came out in '95 or '96, there was a game on that called I'm probably mispronouncing it, but it was called Panzer Dragoon. And
Uh-huh.
anyway, that was the first time I heard live recorded orchestra in a video game. They actually, because it was on a CD, they could actually record the orchestra and put it into the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was awesome because, before then, all we ever heard was, the beeps and the bleeps of electronic music, but now I'm hearing a real orchestra in the game, so that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those two.
Okay. Yeah. For example, me, I've never played, to be honest, Final Fantasy, but it's funny because I know the music, from some particular games like Final Fantasy 9 and other ones, like those tunes kind of went beyond the game. And even if you never play the game, you just, direct, the game to the soundtrack just by hearing it. So, mhm.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And well, as I said before, so your career is not only related to video games, you also do some other things like television and even album writing, like trailer music and everything. So how does writing original music for a video game feel different to write from writing music for another media?
Yeah, so video game music is the main difference is that video game music is non-linear. What that means is, when you watch a film or a TV show, obviously the music's composed to the picture, and you'll compose the musics in a forward-thinking way, straightforward. But in video games, the music's composed in separate tracks. I mean, you'll have, some battle or action tracks,
Hmm.
some exploration tracks. And so the music's going to switch up depending on where the player goes in the game or who they're fighting with, or things like that. So the biggest difference is, in video games, I'm composing standalone pieces of music. Often it'll be like a 2-minute cue for combat or a 2-minute cue for exploration.
Hmm.
And when you're composing, you have to be careful to ensure that the music can transition or crossfade between, the exploration or the combat music, because, it could change at any time. It's not like in
Hmm.
a film where for sure it's going to happen at this point.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the biggest differences.
Yeah, differences, and I would say challenge, no? Because you as a
Hmm.
composer, you never know exactly what the player is going to do. Maybe the player, just heads straight into combat or just, roams around freely in this kind of exploration area. So yeah, I guess it's also a challenge, no?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely can be a challenge, and like we were talking about a little bit a minute or so ago about how nowadays there's a little less emphasis and melody for music.
Hmm.
at least compared to the past. I think that's one of the reasons for that is that sometimes if there's too many melodies going on, when the music changes, the player's going to notice it more and it's going to kind of stick out as sounding a little weird sometimes.
Hmm.
So yeah, that kind of, relying a little more on texture and instrument choice kind of helps the transitions be a little smoother.
Yeah, I guess it's also relying more on ambience, no? On the ambience of the
Hmm.
scene, on the ambience of the level, and all of those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm. And yeah, a little bit, yeah, taking on on the things you said before. It seems to me, at least, that video game composing is reaching like a better level of recognition and importance than say a few years ago. Not only because, of course, well, yeah, we changed platforms and we changed consoles and we have capacitated the directors to do bigger things, but as the branch of video game experience gets bigger, so that's the role played by composers and also the orchestrators. Have you noticed this development as well? What do you think are the challenges of your profession at in this moment, and where is it going?
Yeah, I think there's yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things progress. One of the biggest changes that I noticed, at least in the years since I've been composing, is when mobile games got really big and
Hmm.
independent games. That was when there was kind of a big shift in the industry. Like, if we think back, for example, to the PlayStation 2 era, when it was basically all the games were on the consoles. There was a lot of console development, but then as time went on, online development for games, online video games got really big, and then the mobile devices came out, and so there's so many mobile video games now, and as the tools for video game development became more accessible, we see a lot of independent video game studios now making games, which is something in the past we'd never see. All the development would be done by the bigger studios. So basically, what it means is that there's a lot more variety in the projects
Hmm.
the composers can work on. I mean, you can have your big budget games, made for consoles by the big studios where there'll be a big budget to record the orchestra and everything else.
Hmm.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, you can have small mobile games where it's, a very small amount of music needed and everything in between.
Hmm.
So I think that there's a big kind of a stratification between the scope of projects. And I think what that means for the composer is the composer has to be a little more versatile, maybe,
Hmm.
than in the past. You have to be able to write in various styles of music often, and you have to be equally comfortable recording with an orchestra or producing it to sound really well using your own equipment.
Uh-huh. Well, now that you mentioned this, what path did you use for Rise of Valor? Did you compose that on a software thingy, or did you actually record it with an orchestra?
For that, we did not have a budget for the orchestra, but there was. I mean, all the orchestra sounds I used my own samples and so on, which are really high quality. But I did record some elements in my own studio. I mean, some bit of guitar playing I recorded. There was some vocalizations, to represent the tribal nature that I recorded also.
Hmm.
So I always, even if we don't record an orchestra, I always try to, throw in some instruments here and there, some solo instruments.
Okay, so we have a race in Race of Valor, which is this kind of enemy race. It's called the Toltec, and I guess that those vocal sounds kind of tied very well to them. So it's your voice.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
that's funny. So,
Yeah,
so
it was fun to do, but yes, that was me mumbling or chanting into the microphone. So
okay, yeah, it fits a Toltec. I don't know if you know how the Toltecs look like, but you should
oh
you
yeah,
should have a look.
nice.
And yeah, well, yeah, from all the scores that you did, of course, one of my top favorites is the one of Valor. The final battle with a huge dragon, and it's quite epic. It's crazy. Everything explodes, and this ties to me with trailer music because you also have composed trailer music. And what's so great about composing those smaller pieces? I mean, I guess I kind of understand what is so great, but I would like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I like trailer music a lot for a couple reasons. One of the reasons is that Often it gives a little more room for sonic exploration. What I mean by that is, if you watch a lot of movie trailers nowadays, they'll have a lot of sound design elements in them, like cool sounds that aren't always traditional instruments. So I always like doing stuff like that, using the orchestra, but getting some cool sound design stuff in there to make it sound really modern, really different. Another thing about trailer music is, because it's a trailer, the music has to be super big. It has to be really in your face. It has to be verbal.
Yes.
And I find that, as I do that for trailer music, it's almost easier for me to then do combat music or boss music for video games, because I'm used to doing such music that sounds so big anyway that it's pretty much not hard for me to then apply that to video games if we need a really big sound or a lot of impact for certain music tracks.
Okay. So yeah, if we look to your portfolio, like of the games you have been working on, there are plenty of styles you had the opportunity to explore. So we have science fiction tunes, we have fantasy, minimalistic ambient music, as you mentioned. So you have just all sorts of vibes, synthesizers, rock tunes, medieval age vibes. So what's your top favorite style and why?
I think there's things I like about all of them, but one of the styles that I like a lot, that kind of ties in with the trailer stuff, is the modern style. Basically a modern hybrid style where you'll use the orchestra, but you'll have a lot of sound design or synthesizer elements in there. Maybe some electric guitars. I like that style a lot because you can do a lot of great action music with it. A lot of high adrenaline stuff. And yeah, I just really like the modern sound, that you'll hear in a lot of, film and TV shows nowadays too. I think I gravitate a lot towards that style.
Okay, and you also mentioned back in the previous interview that we had, back, I think it was last year, yeah, that you played piano since you were very young, and before, well, later on you headed, you went into jazz and improvisation. But my guess is also you were trained in more classical compositions, because one of the biggest comparisons that normally, is made between video games and other styles is the connection, especially to classical music. So do you think these two relate, and do you consider yourself influenced by the classics, like let's say 19th century classical music composers, or not really?
Yeah, I'd say I'm definitely influenced by it. Yeah, I mean, I studied classical music pretty extensively. I mean, starting, obviously playing the piano, I would play, lots of 19th century music. In university, I studied composition. I have degrees in composition. So yeah, I mean, orchestration, 19th century orchestration, studied a lot of that, learning how to orchestrate appropriately for the instruments. The ideas of theme and motif development that were used by composers like Beethoven and Wagner, those are concepts that you'll constantly use in video game composing. Another thing that I studied that's, kind of a less popular kind of music, it's basically called 20th century avant-garde art music. It can be, atonal music that sounds initially sounds kind of jarring to the ear because it's very unconventional. But nowadays we'll hear techniques from that used in horror music or in tension music. But yeah, things like that influenced me in thinking of music not only as notes and pitches, but also sound as a whole. So it allows me to think a little more creatively when I compose, and not be too locked into convention and things like that.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And now, coming back into more, modern times, what are your favorite video game soundtracks and composers?
Yeah, I think I mentioned, the Final Fantasy music. Secret of Mana was another video game made by Square Enix back in the day that I liked a lot. One game score that I absolutely love is called Shadow of the Colossus.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an awesome game. And yeah, they had a live orchestra, and what I loved about the music in that is that it wasn't overdone. I mean, it was very artfully composed. It totally stands on its own also. But even though the theme of the game were these big creatures and so on, the music, it had an emotional and kind of personal tone to it that really helped the story of the game. It wasn't excessively, focused on action music. It was just very well done, and
Yeah.
I think that was a real example to me of how much music can add to a game when it's done well.
Yeah, true, true. I mean, I also play that one, and I seriously cannot wait to see what The Last Guardian is all about.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be great too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so talking about video games as well, you in your latest interview you mentioned that you were working on Terraria Otherworld and also on Settlers Kingdoms of Antaria, that now is called Champions of Antaria, if I'm not mistaken. You also mentioned that there were two other projects that were still undisclosed. Can you disclose them now? Can you tell us more information about what things are you working nowadays?
Yeah, back then, a couple of the projects I was working on that came out this year or the end of last year. One of them was Marvel Avengers Alliance 2. That's a Disney interactive social game, and it's the sequel to the previous Avengers Alliance game, which was actually their most successful social game, Disney game. So that was one of them. That was cool because that was a superhero game, and I could compose a lot of kind of over the top action music and theme music to go with the superhero theme of the game. Another one of the projects that I was working on at the time then was called Eve Gunjack. It's a virtual reality game that's set in the Eve online universe. And that was really cool because that was a lot of synthesizer work. It needed to sound modern and space oriented. So there's just a ton of synthesizer work in that. And
So back to science fiction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was a science fiction score.
Okay, cool. So yeah, then I guess that we will know more about your next projects just by checking your website.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm working on, 2 or 3 game scores at the moment, and have some other ones coming up after that. So yeah, I'm always working on something, and yeah, absolutely. My website, I try to keep it up to date as things go on.
Yeah, guys, remember that we are putting the descriptions, all the links in the description down below, so you can check that. And last but not least, Jeff, we also got a question from our community. We always get these questions. It's like how do we get to work in the video game industry? So do you have any advice for any young musicians that are listening to this? Like, how can they go about scoring for games?
Yeah, I think there's some key things that someone can do if they're interested. The first thing is, practice and education. I learned so much about composing, through the orchestra and so on through training in college. I mean, you can learn a lot on your own, but I don't think there's any substitute for having great teachers that can guide you, give you personal feedback and things like that. So I would say, if at all possible, try to study music in college. Prior to that, play in your school bands or take private lessons and so on. I think a lot in addition can be done on your own. You can get a lot of scores to study, like John Williams' classic film scores and so on. I still study those. I mean, I'll buy scores online, and I'll study them and analyze them to continually learn new techniques and so on. Another thing that's important is you really need to learn the technology, meaning the synthesizers and the orchestra samples and so on. You have to be very skilled at mixing, and really that only comes through practice. It's like, if you want to learn an instrument, you're not just going to read a book about playing the instrument. You got to practice it. So
yeah.
so basically you need to practice a lot. When I was in school, studying for a composition degree, I'd have to write a lot of music for that. But I actually ended up writing more music just on my own, practicing, because I constantly wanted to practice and get better. So you need to practice a lot. And the other important piece of advice that I would say if you want to be a composer is, and it's a little less related to music, but you need to have a good sense of business and of marketing, because basically, if you're not working for a game studio, you're running your own business. You're a freelance entrepreneur, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So as much info you can get about that, reading about running a freelance business, about marketing, all that stuff, that's all very important too, because that's the practical stuff that'll allow you to build your business and have the opportunity to do the thing you love, which is compose music.
Okay, guys, so now you know, like those were the little tips that Mr. Jeff gave us here. So, well, Jeff, I'm gonna let you go now. I really thank you so much, for taking these minutes to talk to us, well, to me and the community. It's really, really appreciated. We really think that you did an amazing job with Rise of Valor. I personally enjoyed it so much, and we wish you all the best in your future enterprises.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was great to talk with you, and yeah, all the best.
Yeah, all the best, and hopefully we can see you back in Drakenia, in the future.
Yeah, cool.
And that would be
Great.
nice. And just one more thing for you guys. Don't forget to check in the description box down below, because we were going to put all the links to Jeff's website and also the online retailers that are selling the Rise of Valor soundtrack. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening. This is CMHaruki, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.